Welcome to the People Teaching People podcast. Joining me on the podcast is Mariya Stokes. Mariya and I connected at a Mamas for Mamas Calgary event back in September of 2022, where I had the opportunity to not only see her perform, but also to sit beside her at dinner and have an amazing conversation. Mariya is not only incredibly talented, but also heart-centered in her approach to music and in her connections and interactions with her community. If Casey Musgraves and Lake Street Dive had a country soul love child, the result would be Mariya Stokes. Known for her distinct retro style and quirky sense of humor, Country Music Alberta's two-time Horizon Female Artist of the Year is on the cusp of releasing her debut full-length album. Her most recent single, You Want Me, dropped in February 2024. Growing up in Stavely, Alberta, Mariya's music reflects her roots. Honest country lyrics seamlessly blended with pop-influenced melodies. Additionally, Mariya was a top 8 semi-finalist in SiriusXM's Top of the Country in partnership with the Canadian Country Music Association in 2024. She is looking forward to performing as well on the main stage this summer at Country Thunder, Alberta. Thank you so much for joining me today, Mariya.
Thanks for having me, Tiana. I'm so excited to be here.
I think this is going to be a fun conversation. I'm excited to learn more about you, but where I always like to start is by learning more about my guests and their stories. So, how did your journey as a musician, an artist, and a songwriter, where did that all start, and how has it kind of evolved over time?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I grew up in a tiny little town about an hour south of Calgary called Stavely, Alberta. And my mom says I kind of came out singing. I used to sit in my car seat and make up songs and sing to myself, and always just had a huge passion for music. And eventually, I ended up taking some voice lessons. And by the time I was 8, I started sneaking into our local little hometown bar to sing with the jam band on Friday afternoons, which was pretty wild. And I got the bug for music. And after that, started singing anthems at like rodeos and bridal showers and baby showers and stuff like that. And by the time I had turned 18 and was graduating high school, I built a record and released that when I was 16, which was pretty wild, and was trying to decide if I wanted to go to school to pursue a degree in something and get some higher education, or if I was going to chase this music thing. And my parents actually were the ones who were like, you should go after it. Just give it a year, move to the city, see what you can make happen. And so when I turned 18, I moved to Calgary and moved in with a family friend, got a job serving. And then within a year and a half, I think, of living in the city, I was able to quit my job, and I was teaching voice lessons and guitar lessons and gigging wherever anybody would let me. And I've been a full-time musician for, I think, 8 years now, something like that. I quit my job when I was 20 and have been doing this ever since.
Well, that is incredible. And I'm trying to picture 8-year-old Mariya sneaking
Oh
into
my
the
gosh.
bar and performing. Were there other kids in there too? Or is this like something that you just kind of forged ahead and you wanted to do this?
No, I was the only kid sneaking in at that point. I don't know. I was really fascinated, especially with a band setting, and how people that didn't even necessarily know each other could come together and play a song together and speak this language that I was really wanting to understand. And also the vocal harmonies were really interesting. I was taking guitar lessons a little bit later with my neighbor, actually. And just being kind of in that music space and seeing the connection that was there was always like a driving factor for me.
Now, you and I have chatted about this way before, but I
Hmm.
think it's really interesting for our listeners to hear about. So I'm going to ask it as a question, but was music a huge part of your family? Like, are your mom and dad musicians? Are your siblings musicians? Like, where did kind of this curiosity peak from? I know you said you just kind of started singing at a young age, but where did all that musical influence and joy and passion come from?
Yeah, for sure. Well, music was always playing in our house. We always had different, mostly country CDs playing, but also my dad was in a family band when he was growing up. So he was a drummer and a singer. And then my grandpa on that side is a fantastic keyboard player. And my dad's whole side of the family are all musicians and played like a lot of cabarets and stuff. And so I started with that. And then my other grandpa actually was a bass player in a rock band in the 60s. And he toured all across Canada. They ended up opening for the Beach Boys in the 60s. And so I think just being around it all the time was probably a really big piece of that. And it was because it was around and because people I knew and loved were doing it, it was pretty accessible to me. I was like, oh, this is something that I can actually grab onto. And I was also lucky that in my community in Stavely, there were a lot of musicians as well that would take the time to, like I said, my neighbor taught me guitar. I used to jam with my other neighbor, and they were really warm and welcoming and gave me a space to practice and a place to suck, I guess.
To learn, to grow.
Learn. Yeah. You got to be not good at something before you can get good at it. And it was a safe space to, just to try some new things.
So it sounds like you really had this incredible community of support around you as you were exploring and developing your passion and love for music. So one of the things I asked you to share were, what are some of your most frequently asked questions? And one that you shared was, how do you write songs? So along with being a musician, a singer, you're also a songwriter. So I'm curious what that experience or process of songwriting looks like for you.
Yeah, it's different every time. I think creativity is like a faucet. I don't know where. I must have read that or heard that somewhere, but I heard this quote that really stuck with me where if you turn on a faucet for the first time, your creativity faucet, then sometimes the water that runs out, it drips and it takes a minute and sometimes it's dirty. But if you keep turning that faucet on and running it, eventually the water runs clear and everything comes just a lot easier. And so for me, I start with what I call a hook book. So anytime I hear a phrase in a movie or somebody says something in a conversation or I hear a melody out of open air that kind of sticks with me, I either record it in my voice memos or I write it down in the notes app on my phone. And so I have a lot of ideas always kind of banked for songs to write. And most of them are not very good and will probably never see the light of day. But keeping that faucet on and making sure that I'm capturing those ideas just gives me a lot of options so that when I decide to sit down and either write a song by myself or pursue something solo, or go to a co-write where I'm going with the intent of writing a song with another songwriter or artist, I already have this bank of ideas to draw from. And again, most of them will never see the light of day, but it just gives us kind of a place to start. And that's like the number one thing for me with songwriting is just making sure that I'm prepared and I know what I want to say before I walk into a room.
Mm-hmm. I love that analogy of the faucet.
It's
and
a good one.
Yeah, it's so good. And I love that you've got that strategy to capture those ideas. Because I think sometimes, we have these ideas and then we don't take note of them or record them in some way. And then it's hard to recall what they are. So it's great to have, no matter what creative pursuit we're engaged in, to have a way to really capture those neat ideas. And as you said, you use some of them, maybe not all of them, but you've got a way to hang on to them and keep them somewhere.
Totally. Well, and the thing about co-writing that's really interesting too, and I write by myself a lot, but I also collaborate with a lot of other artists and musicians and songwriters, is that sometimes I'll have an idea and I won't think that there's anything in it, but I'll throw it out just in case. And someone in the room will grab it and be like, I have something that I want to say about that. Let's chase that. And that song or that idea would never have come to life without that other collaborator person in the room. There are no bad ideas. There might be ideas that we don't necessarily chase, but usually, even if I think something's not a right fit for me, sometimes people will grab it and it'll be right for them.
I love that. Do you have like a specific story or example that stands out for you where that has happened before?
Yeah, actually, it was funny. I showed up to a co-write with the first line of my song Rebound that's out right now. And the only line I had was the first line of the chorus, which is, she's the one that you get when the one that got away is already gone. And I was like, I don't know if this is good or if it's something or if it's not. And my co-writer was like, that's a thing. We're going to dig into it. And usually when I'm co-writing, I'm quite slow as a writer. So an average co-write is like 3 hours. And then usually you come out with a song on the end of that. I usually take like 2 sessions. So we'll do like a 3-hour session and then I'll go edit. They'll go edit. We'll think and kind of percolate on what we did. And then we'll come back and rework it again. And this song, after that line came out, and again, I wasn't sure if it was going to be anything, that song wrote itself in 45 minutes. And then after the session, I went home and tried to edit it and sent it to my co-writer. and was like, what do you think about this melody swap? Like, I've worked on these lyrics. And he's like, no, it's perfect the way it is. And, and I was like, okay, I guess we're going to go with it. And now it's my highest stream song to date. And it's one of the ones that I think resonates with me most personally as a human and an artist. And that song never would have come to be unless somebody else in the room had a belief in it.
Huh. I
Yeah.
love that. The power of collaboration, right? And putting things out there, and you just never know where they can go.
Totally. Well, and each artist, songwriter, musician, their skill sets are so different. Sometimes you'll be in a room with a really great, what we call like a top liner. So somebody who's really excellent at melody and really excellent at the almost like the musicality of it. And then you'll have someone who's an incredible lyricist. And then you'll have another person who's working on like the actual production or the track sometimes, and having that meeting of minds with different people who have different life experiences, but also different skill sets within the craft is really cool. And you come up with totally different stuff every time.
Oh, I bet. What an interesting experience, especially working with different people and all the different magic and skill sets that they bring.
Definitely.
When you look back at your journey in music so far, and you can go back as far as you want, what are some of, would you say, the key things that you've learned along the way? And maybe thinking about it in the sense of what advice would you give someone who is thinking they might want to pursue a career in music?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much. I feel like in any career and also in music, you're just constantly learning all the time. So I would say probably number one would be figure out who you are and what you want to say, and then develop your craft and your skill set to a point that you feel like you can actually say the thing in the way that you want to say it. So if you want to be a songwriter, dig into the craft of songwriting, hang out with people that are writing songs that you want to write, and also don't be afraid to collaborate with people that are kind of at the same point as you. That's the other thing I found for me as a songwriter and also as an artist. I really started to figure out what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it when I started working with my peers who were also in the same boat as me. They weren't necessarily further ahead in their journeys than me. They were just like babies in music, starting out and kind of taking a shot in the dark and trying to figure out how this whole thing works. And that community support and having people that are going through the same thing as you and facing the same challenges as you is really huge. And then I would also say, yeah, get mentors that you trust and that genuinely want to see you succeed as you, and again what you want to do and what you want to say. And then also outside of the art and the craft, make sure that you are open and exploring the business side as well. Get as educated and as informed on your rights as an artist, intellectual property, how to book shows, all of like the basics that you need to run a business if you want to run it as a business and if you want to make this a career. Otherwise, if like career and business things are not your goals in music, stick to the other thing. Don't worry about any of that. But yeah, if you want to pursue it as a career, make sure you get educated on what that looks like, because it is a business.
Yeah. And was that something that surprised you when you were starting out, how much you needed to know and understand in order to pursue music as a career?
I remember being 15 at Sled Island. It was my very first festival show ever, and I was the youngest performer. And some of the really great things that happen at conferences and festivals is they do these educational workshops. And I remember sitting down with a branding expert, and she was like, well, she was talking about brand, and I was like, what is a brand? I have no idea. And also talking about how you can have the music and you can have what you want to say, but as an independent artist, there has to be a why and there has to be a visual representation of that as well. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that, about how when you're putting on a show, a big part of it is the visual and the look and the experience. And again, for me, that's not, now that I've dug into it a bunch more, it's more about creating an experience for an audience and communicating what I want to say. But the first time I heard that, I was like, oh gosh, I got to think about what I'm wearing. I got to think about fonts. I got to think about like packaging an album. All these things were completely new to me. And then on top of that, I remember going to a workshop on royalties. And there are so many facets to royalties and intellectual property and all of that kind of stuff and publishing. And after I got out of the session, I had a migraine because I was so overwhelmed by all of the information. And now I have a good handle on it simply because, kind of like my hookbook, I've written down all the things that I need to know, and I have documents that I can reference to understand how all those streams work and such. But yeah, it's a lot right off the top, and it takes like years of digging into it and development and conversations with other artists and industry professionals to get a handle on it. And I'm still learning every single day.
Every day. Well, and it seems like you've got this great sense of curiosity. It's like, okay, like what can I learn from this situation? And there is more to learn, and there's incredible people around me that I can learn from. So it seems like you've got a good sense of curiosity, which is probably really helpful to maintain as you continue your journey. But also, wow, you've learned so much.
Yeah, I think curiosity is probably a keystone of the whole thing because I don't know, if I feel like I'm the person who knows the most in the room, I'm probably in the wrong room because there's always more to grab onto. And also for me, that's one of the big drivers is the curiosity and the fact that there's always more to explore. That's part of the joy.
I'm right there with you. Always more to learn.
And that's why
Absolutely.
you're doing the People Teaching People podcast. That makes 100% sense.
Yes, it
Yeah,
fuels my curiosity because there is so much out there in the world. So, yes, it's a huge gift being able to sit down with people and learn and have an amazing conversation. So, thank you for being a part of it and
of
allowing me
course.
to pick your brain.
100%.
Now, you've had some incredible experiences and received some amazing recognition in your career. And I'm curious, what have been some of the highlights and maybe some of your favorite pinch me moments along the way?
Yeah, it's funny. The awards are always such an incredible experience, and it's so wild to be acknowledged by my community. And I find the biggest pinch me moments actually happen almost on stage. I remember I got asked to open for Trixie Mattel, who was, well, she's a drag race superstar. She's incredible. And I got asked to open and play guitar in her band during the Calgary Stampede. And the band was me and a Nice Horse, and then a couple of freelance musicians in town. If you're not familiar with Nice Horse, check them out. They're wild and also have been really kind and have mentored me a lot throughout this whole process. And it was the first show that Trixie had ever done with a band. And I remember being on stage after learning all her songs on acoustic and the harmonies and all this kind of stuff, and being on stage with I think it was like there were 5 or 6 of us on stage, and there like the band was mostly women, which was super cool. And backing her up and being like, this is wild. We're in the Palace Theater. There's like hundreds of people here. And I'm on stage backing up this superstar. I got hired for this gig. And I think for me, the time that I'd put in into becoming a solid acoustic player and the time that I had put in, as a backup singer as well as a front person was pretty incredible. And also when I opened, I played a few songs that hadn't been released yet, and the crowd was so warm and so welcoming and so kind, and it made my music bug jump even another level. That was pretty incredible.
That definitely sounds like a pinch me moment
Yeah,
with,
it was totally a wild experience, and there's nothing more like it gets you almost high being on stage and sharing a space like that and seeing a crowd like that. And also, again, it was her first time ever playing with a band, and being able to watch that was so cool, and being part of that.
yeah, being in that experience, but also being a part of the impact that you're having on other people too, and being able to witness that and feel that in that moment. That must be so fun to look back on as well.
Yeah, live shows are, yeah, they're wild. That one. And then, the first show we did back after things started to open up during the pandemic, after the pandemic, sorry. When we played Nashville North, it was 5,000 people in a tent, and it was one of our first shows back. And after the Saturday that I played, I got off stage and just instantly like broke down and just started crying because it had been 2 years since I'd been able to do that. And that's kind of, honestly, playing live is what balances my brain and keeps me kind of stable and sane. And I just like literally lost it after getting off stage because I had missed it so much.
Hmm. Yeah, and being back in those venues like with live music, there is just something so magical about it. I was chatting with some friends about that actually. It's just there's so much joy and so much energy that can come from listening to music, but being in a place with other people with music is just next level. It's something else.
Definitely. It's the, I don't know, it's the one of the most basic forms of human connection, I think, and being a part of that is always such a privilege.
Now, what are you working on and excited about that's coming up next?
It's funny you said pinch me moments. One of my other pinch me moments, to loop around to this, I just finished a record, my first full length album, which is really exciting. And another pinch me moment was when I got to listen to it top down after it was finished in my car. And again, just like full goosebumps, because I have wanted to make this record for a long time. That's been one of my biggest goals since I started music. And I am so excited that it's finally started to come out this year. And that's kind of the biggest thing that's on my radar right now, is just sharing that music with everybody, and then prepping for a bunch of summer shows as well, where we're going to get to actually play a bunch of the record out. That's what I'm really excited about.
Well, huge congrats. And anything sort of specific maybe people could look at planning for to come and check you out and see you performing live?
We're going to be at Country Thunder on the main stage this summer, which is really exciting. Headlining Southern Alberta Music Fest. We'll be at Nashville North for 4 days during the Stampede. There's quite a few festivals this year that are going to be a blast. And then it hasn't been announced yet, but we're doing a run of shows in Southern BC in August as well. So we'll be on tour for a couple weeks out there.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
That's huge. Congrats to you. That's
Thank you.
incredible. Yes.
Oh, actually, also, and there's one more, Ride to Remember with Devin Cooper and JJ Shiplet. It's the 5th annual fundraiser for the Alzheimer's Society of Calgary, and it's happening at the Palace Theatre on June 29th, and all proceeds go specifically to that cause. Devin's been hosting this event for 5 years and has just grown exponentially since he started it, and I've played it every single year, and yeah, we're aiming to raise $50,000 this year for the Alzheimer's Society of Calgary.
Oh, that's an amazing one. Thank you for sharing that one as well. And actually, this leads so nicely into what I was hoping we could talk about next, because you and I first connected at a Mamas for Mamas Calgary event.
Yeah.
You performed and we were chatting at the table there, and I was so impressed by your performance, but in our conversation, also just so touched by your community-minded values and some things that you shared with me. Well, now this event that you're participating in to raise money, but that you've also taught songwriting workshops to youth in partnership with community organizations and at schools, including the Women's Centre of Calgary and through the Calgary Board of Education. So I would love to learn from you why giving back to the community is so important to you.
Yeah, I think as a member of the community, it's interesting growing up in a small town, because I thought it was so normal. We would have families that were going through difficult times, and the whole community would rally together and put together a fundraiser with a silent auction and live music, and the Elks would donate a meal, and there would be tickets, and the whole community would kind of come together to support whoever was in need. And when I left my small town, I realized that still happens, but it's a little bit harder to organize sometimes in a big city. And I almost took for granted how important community support is, especially lifting people that are in tough times, which we all have. And so I think my parents also always said, you get out of a community what you put into it. So if you want support when you're down, then you got to make sure that you're supporting people when they're down too. And so I just kind of took that with me when I moved to the city, and was really fortunate to be an artist in residence at the Women's Center of Calgary. And yeah, taught some songwriting workshops there with Girls Lead YYC. They are a youth organization and an after school program for girls that hang out and attend in the Women's Center. And it was such a cool experience because these girls are so much smarter and more educated and more informed than I ever was at their age. If they're the next leaders, like, we're in good hands. And for me, songwriting is a baseline form of expression. It's how I process a lot of how I'm feeling, and when I'm going through things, it helps me externalize some of my emotions. And I think, again, whether you want to pursue music as a career or do it as something that just makes your soul happy, it's such a powerful way to connect and to externalize what you're feeling. And so my songwriting courses that I taught there and that I've done, with the Calgary Board of Education and some of the work that I've done with BAM Camp here in Calgary, it focuses mostly on that, just on figuring out how to say what you want to say and putting it down on paper so you don't have to hold on to it anymore. And I also find songwriting specifically, people listen, they hear differently if you say something in a song versus if you just speak it aloud. I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that where you've heard a song and it's made you connect in a way to something that you didn't realize. Even like a good example is Tennille Townes, Somebody's Daughter, is a really great example because you can really see the humanity in her story and the story she tells versus like if somebody tells you the story versus singing it to you. There's just a different, there's like, I don't know, the osmosis is so different. It's strange. I hear better when I hear it in song.
There is such an emotional piece to music.
Yes.
I think, yeah, as you're saying, it can just touch you in such a way, it can evoke such different feelings. And you're right, if somebody were just to kind of read the words out loud, it wouldn't be quite the same.
No. Yeah. I did some work with the Calgary Drop-In and Rehab Center. Actually, when I first moved to the city, I was asked to be part of a program called Shelter from the Storm. And so it took volunteer artists from the community, clients of the DI, and then staff at the DI. And we all got together, told some stories, and wrote some songs based on everyone's experiences. And it was so interesting because we did, again, a performance at Sled Island, which is funny because that keeps popping up. And it was interesting seeing even like some folks from my hometown where homelessness and poverty looks quite different in the city. And sometimes there's a little bit of a different mentality around that when you're coming from a small town. And just hearing folks' stories and how they have found community at the DI and what that looks like for them, I think it opened a lot of eyes, and it definitely opened mine. And that's songs, that's music.
Yeah, that sounds like a very powerful takeaway from those experiences for you. What would you say, is there anything else that you really found was like something that you learned through your experiences with teaching and giving back to the community?
Is there anything else that I found? Yeah, that when I teach, it also reminds me why I started, which is exciting. Being around the energy of youth or people who are just starting out is so exciting because, again, when I get too deep in it, and I've been doing this for a while, it's such a beautiful reminder that the reason that I started doing this is because it's so freaking fun. And because being around people who are excited about learning a new skill and connecting with community and being in a space where they're like a little unsure, but they're taking these creative risks it reignites my passion. That's a big thing.
Mm-hmm. And it's so wonderful for you to be a part of creating that space and place for them to do that.
Yeah, it's a privilege for sure.
So what are you listening to these days?
Okay, I've been on the biggest Chappell Roan kick. Have you listened to any Chappell Roan?
No.
Oh my gosh, she has a new record out. I think it's called the Downfall of a Midwest Princess, and her whole persona is like she's like a drag queen. It's incredible. Her visuals. I saw a music video for her song. It's called Casual. And anyway, it's like mermaid themed. Just like the world that she's creating around this incredible music that she has is so inspiring to me. And she's so fearless in her art, and I admire it big time. I've been listening to her nonstop.
Okay, thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah,
I'm going to be adding it to my list. I'm always looking to pick people's brains about the things they're listening to, watching, doing. So thank you for that recommendation.
For sure.
Now, I wanted to kind of switch gears a little bit. On your Instagram account, it says, I write country songs and steal my grandma's clothes.
Yeah.
So what sparked your interest in vintage, or aka grandma, fashion and personal style?
I think a big part of it is that I was always a secondhand shopper growing up. When I was a little kid, my mom, when we would start to get ready for going back to school, she would be like, okay, we're going to go shopping in the basement. And we'd go down there, and all my cousins' old clothes were down there. And my parents really allowed me to have a lot of freedom in the way that I dressed, which, looking back at the pictures, is wild because some of the things they let me out of the house in are incredible. There's a photo, actually, oh my gosh, there's a photo of me with Santa and another girl that I went to school with, and she's like perfectly coordinated in this like beautiful red outfit and she looked so great. And I'm wearing a pair of cowboy boots, sweatpants that I had turned backwards because I had blown holes in the knees from wearing them too much. So I flipped them backwards. And then a 4-H t-shirt that had like, it was like homemade by one of my cousins and had, oh my gosh, horseshoes on it. And I just like, I look like a wreck. But anyway, comfort was always number one for me. And my parents didn't try to restrict what I wore. They kind of just let me run free. And I think as I grew older and going through like junior high and high school and trying to find, my personal sense of style, that was quite uncomfortable because I didn't really understand trends or what was stylish. And I think being in music and learning how to be more comfortable with myself and learning to express myself in a way that felt good to me, part of that translated into taking fashion risks that didn't include turning my sweatpants backwards, although I may still do that at home once in a while. But yeah, just finding pieces that really resonated with me that I could feel comfortable in and move in, and that express who I am on the inside and who I want to be in the world. That's kind of where that started. Also, thrifting is so much more affordable. It takes a lot more time, but it's more affordable. There's so many cool boutiques, especially around Calgary and around Western Canada. And also vintage clothes last longer. So I'll just say that.
They don't make things like they used to.
No, I can find like a pair of jeans at a thrift store or a vintage store, like real denim, and they'll last me. Like some of my jeans I've had for 10 years and they still are great. You got to patch them once in a while, but they last.
They do. Yes, they definitely hold up a lot better than many things do today, but I love that you turned your sweatpants around. That works. That
Yeah, I don't know.
works.
My parents, maybe I was stubborn and not worth fighting with, but yeah, they allowed me a lot of freedom of expression as a child.
It sounds like they really let you be who you are.
Yeah, they did. I don't know if they had, like I said, I don't know if they had much choice. I had to learn manners and how to be polite and how to know my audience and exist in spaces respectfully. But the way that I presented myself was pretty much up to me. So,
I love that. I love that so much. Now, you shared a little bit about this idea of the business side of music, and where do you kind of see personal style playing into both self-expression, but then also branding yourself as an artist?
it's interesting. I was thinking about this the other day, especially as an up and coming artist. And I've played big stages, but a majority of the stages that I've played have been smaller spaces. And so one of the things is when I'm on stage, I want people to be able to recognize like who I am and what I stand for. And my personal style definitely plays into that. But also when I come off stage, I want to be able to engage with people and have conversations. And if I look the same as everyone else that's in the room, it's really hard to identify sometimes, especially for me. Like there was an artist that I went and saw. It was like a smaller local show. And it took me a second when they got off stage because they were kind of dressed like everyone else in the room. And I was like, I want to go tell that singer that they did a great job, but I can't find them because I can't, like they're not standing out, which sounds kind of silly. But yeah, just that visual representation so that people know kind of what they're getting into with your music, and also so that if they want to come chat with you or they want to find your stuff afterwards, there's a thing, you can see the thing, and they're easier to find.
That makes a lot of sense. So, where do you like to shop for your clothes, or where do you find the things that you love to wear?
Yeah. Okay. So I have a stylist. Her name is Laurel Holmes. The funny thing, I've always kind of vibed in that 1970s era. Like I love bell bottoms. I love loud colors and bold prints. I love jumpsuits. I don't wear dresses on stage hardly ever just because they're very hard to move in. And also, yeah, you got to be careful in a dress. And that show is going to cost a lot more than the one that I want to put on. Anyway, I had started posting a lot of these looks that I was finding in a lot of these clothes, and Laurel actually went to junior high with me in Nanton, Alberta, so just a few minutes away from my hometown. And she had reached out and was like, I came out of school. I went down. I was in Texas going to fashion school, and I was working with fabrics, and I'm a designer, and I'd really love to work with you on some of the things that your stage outfits and what you're building. And I was like, okay, well, super cool that she's from my hometown. Super cool that she's put so much time into pursuing, again, kind of an unconventional career path, especially being like a farm kid from Nanton, Alberta. And awesome that she reached out. And since then, that relationship has just grown and grown. And so a big part of my personal style and how it's evolved has been that Laurel actually really pushes me in directions that I never ever thought I would go style wise. But she makes me feel comfortable and understands the scope of what my job is and how to push me out of my comfort zone to kind of take it to the next level. So a lot of what we do is I look for stuff on my own, but she also is constantly checking out vintage stores, designing new pieces, connecting with different local designers. And so it's definitely a team effort on that end now, having Laurel as part of the team.
That sounds like an incredible person to have in your corner, but I love the full circle piece of it and how you kind of came back together.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Well, and she's such an incredible designer. I don't know if you my press photos right now, so I'm wearing like yellow bell bottoms. So those are custom made by Laurel. And then for the Country Music Alberta Awards this year, she was like, "Okay, well, we need to continue to build out this kind of time capsule wardrobe that you have so we can rewear some of the pieces that you have and we're not constantly, looking for new things." So she built this really cool like big bell sleeve crop top out of the same material. And now I can take the crop top or the pants and wear them together or wear them with other pieces. And the whole thing is just like quite cohesive because she has such great long-term vision.
That's amazing. She sounds incredibly creative and very aligned with who you are and how you want to express yourself and be. But I love too that she pushes you.
Definitely. There's actually a jacket. It's a black leather jacket, black and white striped. I wear it all the time. And when she brought it to me initially, I was like, I would never wear that. Like, what are you talking about? And then put it on and was like, well, I'll never take this off again. So it's funny.
You love it.
Yeah. And it's interesting how a stylist or somebody who works in a field parallel to yours that can push a little bit can really accelerate growth and again see ways to express creatively that maybe I wouldn't see. So
Yeah, because she's got a zone of genius.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, she's out there kind of looking at the world through a little bit of a different lens and seeing some great opportunities for you.
Definitely.
So it sounds like along your journey, you've had some incredible mentors and teachers and people guiding you and supporting you as you've moved along. So I'm wondering if you have a favorite teacher or a favorite learning experience that you've had along the way. And if you can think of someone or something, why maybe that person or experience stands out so much for you.
Definitely. One of my earliest mentors and still mentors to this day, his name is Brian Farrell, and he's a vocal coach and a performance coach in the city. And when I was 15 or 16, I think, and started really taking this thing seriously, I would drive up to his place for voice lessons every 2 weeks in Calgary, which was also a grand adventure simply because an hour and a half drive up, he's in Bears Paw, from Stavely in the city in my tiny little Sunfire was scary every single time. Anyway, but the cool thing about Brian is the way that he teaches. The biggest thing that I think I've pulled from years of working with him is that it's not about doing this on stage, like throwing energy out. It's about opening your arms and inviting people in. And that has really changed the way that I look at performance and music and life. And still to this day, if I'm feeling ungrounded or I'm heading into something where I'm not exactly sure like how to show up, or I'm just feeling a little off balance, I can go and sit with Brian and talk to him. And he just continues to remind me to stay in my lane, which is who I am, sit on my island. I don't have to go with the flow and be in the middle of all the chaos. I can kind of find a space that's my own outside of it. And that's how it's kind of carried through from the beginning to now. But also, the other really cool thing about what he did as a teacher, which I think is very different than a lot of vocal coaches, is we would do a few sessions and then he would host this performance workshop. It was called Turntable Creative, and he still does it. And what would happen is all the students of all ages would come together and perform a song in front of him and another mentor named Neil McGonigal, who's a really incredible business manager in town and has done a lot of things all over the world. And then sometimes he would bring in a guest artist as well. And so instead of just going to singing lessons and taking these lessons and singing in our bedrooms, we actually had the opportunity to work that second skill set, which is getting totally nervous in front of your peers and mentors and having the space to actually live in that fear and that anxiety and be in a supportive space where there's critical feedback, but you also get to kind of overcome that. I think especially in any skill set, if you can do it alone in your bedroom amazing. But as soon as you get on stage or in front of people and that adrenaline hits, that's a whole nother learning curve to work through. And he really created a space for all artists of all levels to do that.
I love that so much about him creating that space and that opportunity to take that next step or move to that next level.
Well, and it's for me now, singing my own songs is one thing, singing in general is one thing, but I've been working on electric guitar. And it's funny because in my bedroom, I'm a pretty okay electric guitar player. It's a different skill set and a totally different instrument than playing acoustic. When I get on stage, my hands like freeze up a little bit. And so I just have to be okay to get through the adrenaline. Like there's continually all these little things where, yeah, the adrenaline builds up and the panic sets in, and working that muscle and learning how to overcome that again, I think is like it's a lifelong adventure.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think for a young performer or somebody who's wondering if this might be something that they like to pursue and they're listening to what you're saying, and to hear you say, that like I'm constantly learning and growing, and I have this thing that I'm trying to do, and in my bedroom I'm good, but then I get up there and these are the things that I'm feeling and I have to work through it. It makes it seem like, okay, maybe this is something that I can do too. Or for anything hard that we might want to do that isn't something we feel as confident or comfortable with, and taking that next step can be tough, but it's, as you said, sort of working way through it.
One bite at a
Yeah.
time, little risks. Like for the guitar thing, it was funny. I was trying to do leads, and my musical director, who's also my guitar player, was like, okay, we're going to take a step back because we know you can do it. You're doing it in a rehearsal. It's fine. But we're going to do all the small things, like the Blink 182 song, where instead of trying to do the really intricate guitar fingering thing, you can just like slam power chords. And we did the slamming of the power chords, and it went really well. I slammed the heck out of those power chords, and then that boosted my confidence a little bit. So maybe next time we can do a little less slamming of the power chords and more of the intricate stuff. But yeah, it's just taking little steps to build your confidence. And I think that's something that we're all working on.
So when you look back at your journey so far, with so much more to come, but what would be something that you're the most proud of?
Right now, it changes. It's so funny. It changes all the time. I think the biggest thing that I'm most proud of in this moment is A, that my record's done, and B, that I have a team of people around me that I've built relationships with and trust 1000% over years, that are actually going to help this record reach the people it needs to reach and be successful in a way that I could never make it successful on my own. I'm really proud that I have let go of enough control and have become aware of what I'm good at and what I'm not so good at, and been able to let go of some of the things that I'm not so good at, and found people that believe in this thing that we're trying to create as much as I do. I feel really lucky because of that. And that was probably one of the biggest struggles for me in my music, was just letting go of control and letting people in to see that there are a lot of things that I struggle with, and that it's okay, even in business or personally, to ask for help and to let other people take over some of that stuff.
That's a hard thing to do.
It's really hard, for sure.
What's next? What's something else that you'd like to learn about, or something else that you'd like to learn how to do? So I know electric guitar,
Yeah.
you're kind of working on that. Is there anything else that you're curious about?
Yeah, I've started sewing. I'm terrible at it. And I really think I might actually take some classes, because I'd like to start designing and building some more of my own clothes. I started rhinestoning, which also is a lot easier than actually like tailoring and sewing. But I've started digging into it a little bit, but I didn't realize that most of sewing is not actually using the machine. It's measuring and cutting and ironing. The first project I think I tried to do, I didn't even have an iron, and was like, I'll just figure it out. In fact, you cannot just figure it out. Material does need to be ironed, and you do need to measure, or it will not turn out the way you want it to. So yeah, I think I'd really like to get into designing some of my own pieces for stage, but that's going to be a lot of time and a big learning curve for sure.
But something totally doable. You've got
Thank
this.
you. Yeah. Well, and I'll have to ask my stylist, Laurel, because she's, like I said, an incredible designer. She's been teaching me little things here and there, but I think I should probably actually take a class.
Nice to have that mentor in your corner, though, for sure.
100%.
Now, if you could sit down and have a conversation with someone that you would love to learn from, who would that person be and why?
It's funny. I think the first person who popped into my mind was Carolyn Dawn Johnson. Are you familiar with her at all?
Her name sounds familiar to me, but I'm going to need you to expand.
Okay, so when I was 8 years old, again, 8 or 9, that was like apparently that was a big music year for me. I was at the Pinoca Stampede and Keith Urban was headlining, and Carolyn Dawn Johnson, who's actually from Alberta, I think she's from Grand Prairie originally. She's an incredible songwriter and artist in country music. She was opening for Keith Urban and she did this mashup of all these songs, all these hit songs that she had written that she didn't perform. So other artists ended up performing them. And that was the first time that I'd realized that being a songwriter was its own career outside of being a musician or artist. And I really admire her grace, her authenticity. She's the same person on and off stage. And it's funny because we were talking about Chapel Roan. I find it really fascinating to look at artists like Carolyn Dawn Johnson, who's just 100% herself 100% of the time. And then Chapel Roan, who has this almost like drag persona on stage. And actually, both of them I would love to chat with just to see how they balance that, the personal side and the artist side, and what the overlap is and how they stay grounded and consistent and true to themselves, whether they're doing like an artist persona or actually being themselves. I think that's really interesting.
Those would be great conversations to have.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've sort of woven the teaching, learning, education topic through our conversation. I'm so passionate about the fact that education is really so much a part of everything that we do. And I'm wondering if you have any final words of wisdom or thoughts that could empower or support people on their own teaching or learning journeys.
I would it's funny, you said it earlier, stay curious is, I think, probably the number one thing. There's always so much more to learn. And the second we stop being curious, the second, for me anyway, things get boring. And then, yeah, I got to chase something. So being curious would be number one. And then the other thing is that if there's something that you want to learn or you get presented an opportunity that feels totally out of your wheelhouse, but it feels like something that you want to do, say yes and figure out the rest later. There's always somebody who can teach you the thing. There's always online resources. There's folks to reach out to. But I would say don't limit yourself because your skill set isn't quite there yet. Just figure out how to get your skill set where it needs to be and then say yes anyway.
I love that. That's great advice.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like half of the things that I've done have been opportunities that I don't know if I was 100% prepared for, but the growth that came with them and the speed of learning and the connections that I got to make were pretty cool.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Mariya, I want to thank you so very much for sharing your time and your stories and all your words of wisdom with us today. So if our listeners are curious about you and want to learn more about you and all the things that you're up to, where are the best places to find you?
I have a website at www.mariyastokes.com. My name is spelled a little goofy. It's Mariya. And then on all platforms, I'm just at Mariya Stokes. So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all the places I post there pretty consistently. So
perfect.
yeah.
I'll make sure to share all that. And thank you so very much for joining me today. It was fantastic to connect with you and to learn from you.
Thank you for letting me learn from you and for an incredible conversation as well. I appreciate you having me.